Revolutions do not happen because people suddenly become angry. They happen because a society reaches a breaking point that has been building for decades, sometimes centuries. Every major revolution in history begins with the same sequence, the same psychological triggers, the same political mistakes, and the same economic patterns. It is never random. It is never accidental. It is predictable. And the terrifying truth is this: the United States in 2025 shows the exact same warning signs that appeared in France in 1789, Russia in 1917, and Cuba in 1959, long before violence erupted. To understand why revolutions start the same way, we must step inside the minds of ordinary people living through collapse. Because revolutions are not caused by the poorest, the angriest, or even the most radical. They are caused by millions of people who one day decide the system will never fix itself. We must force change. That psychological shift, not violence, is where every revolution truly begins. Let's break down the pattern. Step 1. Extreme wealth inequality. All three revolutions began when the gap between rich and poor became morally unbearable. France, 1789. The nobility and clergy paid no taxes. Peasants paid everything. The rich lived in palaces. The poor starved for bread. Bread price, marn 88% of a poor person's income. Inequality wasn't just economic, it was insulting. Russia, 1917. The Tsar lived in luxury while factory workers worked 14-hour days. 80% of the population were peasants with no land rights. Aristocrats controlled everything. Starvation was common even in good years. Cuba, 1959. Havana was full of casinos and wealth. Meanwhile, rural Cubans had no education, no health care, and no land. American corporations owned much of the economy. Batista and his friends took all the money. USA, 2025. The top 0.1% own more wealth than the bottom 90%. CEOs make 350x more than workers. Housing is unaffordable. Healthcare is unaffordable. Education is unaffordable. Inequality doesn't start revolutions, but it is the fuel that makes them explosive. Step 2. Government corruption and incompetence. Revolutions do not start when the people suffer. They start when the people believe the government won't fix anything. France Louis XVI was indecisive. The government was bankrupt. Elites refused to pay taxes. Reforms were blocked by the privileged. Russia's Tsar Nicholas II ignored suffering, ignored protests, ignored reform. His government was corrupt, incompetent, and disconnected from reality. He believed God chose him, so he didn't need to change. Cuba Batista stole money, rigged elections, tortured dissidents, and sold the country to foreign interests. USA 2025. Congress is deadlocked. Lobbyists control policy. Both parties accuse each other of corruption. Half the population believes the government works only for elites. Public trust is collapsing. When citizens conclude the government is not just failing but also lying, the revolutionary clock begins ticking. Step 3. Middle class collapses and turns against the system. This is the most important step and the most misunderstood. Revolutions are not started by the poorest people. They are started by the middle class, the educated, the professionals, the people who once believed in the system. France lawyers, merchants, intellectuals formed the National Assembly. These were not starving peasants. They were educated men who expected more. Russia students, teachers, and urban workers radicalized before the peasants did. The Bolsheviks recruited engineers, doctors, writers. Cuba Fidel Castro was a lawyer from a prosperous family. Most early revolutionaries were young intellectuals, not poor farmers. USA 2025. The American middle class is shrinking. Student debt is crushing an entire generation. Home ownership is out of reach. Young Americans feel betrayed by the system. When the middle class snaps, revolutions ignite. Step 4. Loss of faith in institutions. This is the point where society breaks psychologically. People stop believing the courts are fair, the police protect them, elections matter, the government will change anything. The media tells the truth. The system works. France people lost trust in the monarchy after repeated failures. Russia. The army mutinied in 1917. That was the death blow. Cuba Batista had zero legitimacy. Even the U.S. withdrew support. USA 2025. Trust in institutions is the lowest recorded in American history. 70% believe the media lies. 50% do not trust elections. 80% think the country is on the wrong track. Trust in the Supreme Court collapsing. Trust in the justice system collapsing. Trust in police collapsing. Trust in universities collapsing. A nation cannot survive without shared belief in its institutions. When that belief dies, the rules no longer matter. This is why revolutions escalate rapidly after this step. Step 5. Rise of extremist movements. Once trust in the system collapses, people look for alternatives. And the alternatives that rise first are always extremes, not moderates. France Jacobins, radical, violent, uncompromising. Russia, the Bolsheviks, disciplined, ideological, revolutionary. Cuba Castro's 26th of July movement, guerrillas with a clear mission. Moderates always fail because they can't fix the crisis fast enough. Extremists thrive because they promise justice, revenge, a new system, a new start, punishment for the corrupt and desperate people. Listen. USA 2025. Extremism is rising on both left and right. Millions support radical solutions. Social media accelerates polarization. Each side believes the other is dangerous. Moderates are disappearing. This is the final warning before the explosion. Step 6. The trigger event. Every revolution has a spark. France storming of the Bastille. Russia, bread riots, plus military mutiny. Cuba, Batista fleeing the country. USA. Nobody knows. Yet, but the trigger is always the same type of event. A moment that proves the government has lost control. A contested election, a police shooting, a high-profile assassination, a financial crash, a failed military deployment, a major social breakdown. Once the spark lights the fuse, the entire system moves to stage 7. Step 7. The collapse and power vacuum. After the trigger event, the collapse is fast. France monarchy destroyed, terror begins, 40,000 executed. Napoleon rises, Russia czar removes, civil war erupts. Millions die, Soviet Union created Cuba. Batista flees, Castro seizes power. Communist dictatorship begins, USA? Unknown. But history suggests authoritarian leader, national fragmentation, economic collapse, political violence, military involvement, major restructuring of the government. Because once a republic loses legitimacy, something fills the void, and it is rarely democracy. Why every revolution follows the same pattern? Because human societies break the same way. They build trust slowly, they destroy trust quickly, and once trust dies, the system cannot survive. Revolutions are not about ideology. They are about psychology. They are about what people believe or stop believing. And the United States in 2025 has already crossed the first 5 steps. Revolutions are remembered for their explosions, but they are born in whispers. By the time the streets fill with crowds, by the time gunfire echoes through cities, the revolution has already happened in the minds of millions. This is the final phase, the transformation from anger to action. And in every revolution, France, Russia, Cuba, the moment action becomes inevitable, follows the same psychological formula. 1. People believe the system is broken. 2. People believe the system will never fix itself. 3. People believe change is worth the risk. 4. People believe the alternative, even chaos, is better than the status quo. That last step is the tipping point. No government can survive it. Let's go deeper into how this final shift unfolds, and why analysts fear the United States is dangerously close to repeating it. Step 6. The trigger event in detail. The moment when revolution stops being theory and becomes reality. The trigger event is not the cause of the revolution. It is merely the spark that ignites a society already soaked in gasoline. In France, the spark was symbolic, storming the Bastille, a prison that held only 7 prisoners but represented centuries of oppression. In Russia, the spark was human, women in bread lines, starving and furious, demanding food. The army refused to fire on them. That single decision collapsed a 300-year dynasty. In Cuba, the spark was political. Batista fleeing the country, leaving a power vacuum that Castro filled instantly. Trigger events always share three characteristics. 1. They reveal the government is powerless. People see the state fail live, in real time. 2. They unify anger. Different groups, workers, students, middle class, suddenly align emotionally. 3. They accelerate everything. What was supposed to take years happens in weeks. Now, the uncomfortable question: what could be the trigger event for the United States? Historians outline several high-risk scenarios. A contested presidential election, a financial meltdown that wipes out savings, a viral police incident igniting nationwide riots, a political assassination, a major cyber attack collapsing infrastructure, a military humiliation abroad, a state-federal confrontation, border, laws, National Guard. All of these would trigger the same psychological response France, Russia, and Cuba experienced. The system cannot protect us anymore. Once millions believe that, the shift to stage 7 happens terrifyingly fast. Step 7. Collapse in the power vacuum. Collapse is not one event. It is a sequence of failures. 1. The government loses moral authority. 2. Security forces split or become overwhelmed. 3. Regions stop obeying the central government. 4. Extremist groups seize momentum. An alternative power structure appears. Let's break down how this unfolded in the 3 major revolutions, and how it could unfold in the U.S. France, from revolt to terror. Once the monarchy collapsed, France didn't become free. It became chaotic. The National Assembly fought with radical Jacobins. The economy collapsed. Food shortages worsened. Extremists took control. 40,000 people were executed. Rival factions murdered each other. Regional rebellions erupted everywhere. France traded one corrupt system for something far worse. This is the universal pattern. Revolutions are rarely controlled by the moderates who start them. Russia, from protests to civil war. Russia in 1917 is the clearest example of the power vacuum effect. Once the Tsar was removed, the provisional government was too weak. Soldiers deserted the front lines. Peasants seized land. Workers took control of factories. The Bolsheviks organized quietly, preparing to strike. Foreign powers interfered. Full civil war exploded between 1917 and 1922. 10 million people died. Russia didn't become stable again for decades. Cuba, from hope to dictatorship. Castro promised democracy, freedom, elections. But as soon as he seized power, opponents were arrested, hundreds executed, private property seized, media shut down, political parties banned. Cuba became a one-party state. That's the secret of revolutions. They replace a corrupt system with a powerful man. They replace injustice with control. They replace instability with authoritarianism. Because in chaos, people will accept anything that brings order. What would stage 7 look like in the United States? This is the most dangerous section because historians, intelligence agencies, and military strategists are already modeling it. The U.S. would not collapse like France or Cuba. It would collapse like the Soviet Union, fast, fractured, and messy. Possibility 1. States stop obeying the federal government. We are already seeing early versions. Texas versus federal government on border control. States refusing federal mandates. States ignoring federal court rulings. Sheriffs refusing to enforce laws. States forming interstate alliances. Once a few states openly defy Washington, the union becomes fragile. Possibility 2. Police and military divisions. In every revolution, the turning point is when security forces split. Some side with the government. Some side with protesters. Some refuse to act. Some retreat to protect local communities. The U.S. military is highly professional, but it is not immune. National Guard is controlled by governors. Local police answer to cities, not Washington. Military members have political divisions. Federal agencies compete with each other. If a major crisis forces these groups to pick sides, Unity breaks. Possibility 3. Economic breakdown. Every revolution triggers economic chaos. Bank runs, store closures, supply chain collapse, food shortages, energy grid failures, panic buying, currency instability. The US is extremely vulnerable because everything relies on digital systems, supply chains are global, households have almost no savings. The dollar is deeply tied to confidence. A crisis would spread within hours. Possibility 4. Rise of a strongman. This is the oldest pattern in history. When people are afraid, they follow the strongest voice. In France, Napoleon in Russia, Lenin, then Stalin in Cuba, Castro in Germany, Hitler in his own economic chaos. The US is already polarized around strong personalities. A crisis would amplify this massively. Possibility 5. Fragmentation into regions. The US is so large that it would not collapse uniformly. West Coast could form a bloc. Texas and several southern states could unify. Northeast could consolidate. Midwest could break into smaller blocks. Federal government would lose power. This is not speculation. Intelligence agencies openly study this scenario. Why this pattern always repeats? Revolutions follow identical stages because human psychology never changes. 1. When inequality grows, resentment grows. 2. When government corruption rises, trust falls. 3. When the middle class collapses, the system loses its foundation. 4. When institutions lose legitimacy, people search for alternatives. 5. When extremes rise, moderates disappear. 6. When a trigger hits, the society snaps. 7. When the government breaks, something fills the void. This is the same for France. Monarchy collapses Russia. Empire collapses Cuba. Dictatorship collapses USA. Stage 5 is already active. Is the United States next? History never repeats exactly, but it always rhymes. The US shows Stage 1, inequality. Stage 2, corruption. Stage 3, middle class collapse. Stage 4, institutional distrust. Stage 5, extremism and division. Only Stage 6 and Stage 7 remain. No nation has reversed the process at Stage 5. Not Rome, not Britain, not the Soviets. Revolutions are not myths. They are mathematical consequences. The question is no longer if the pattern fits. The question is when the match is lit.